Another fundamental recipe when it comes to cooking fruits and vegetables has to be potato puree. So I'm going to show you the perfect way to do it. For that I have a Purée potato. It's a floury potato and it's the best one in my opinion for potato puree. First, let's peel it. Now that we've peeled the potatoes, we can cut them into even pieces. It's always super important to cut your ingredients into even pieces because it allows for a more even cooking. And we cut the potato into like big chunks just to make sure it's boiling a bit faster, because if you don't do this, there is a possibility that the outside will be cooked already and the inside will be still raw. Then transfer the potato into a pan with cold water. Season the water with some salt, then put the pan on a medium-high heat and bring it to a boil and boil the potatoes for around 15 minutes. Now while the potatoes are cooking, we're going to melt the butter. I know this looks like a lot of butter, and it is, because what I'm using is 1 part of butter to 1 part of potato. You don't want the butter to brown, only melt. So once it's melted, turn off the heat and just wait for the potatoes to boil. Now to test if the potato is cooked, I always use a fork or a knife. It's quite simple. You just prick the potato, and if it goes through easily, then you know it's cooked. Now you can see it on the outside as well. The surface is starting to become a bit spongy, and when you press into it, it falls apart. That means it's time to drain the water, and then we're going to let it air dry for 5 minutes. Now, it's always super important to let the potatoes steam dry, because you want all the liquid, all the water to vaporize. Otherwise, you'll be left with a very watery or soggy puree. When passing the potato through a fine sieve, I always use a ladle. You can also use a spatula or a spoon, but a stiff, hard ladle is such a good gadget for this, because you're able to put some pressure on the potatoes and easily press them through the fine sieve. Now I know normally most of you would use a potato press, so like the sieve one where you twist it like this. You could definitely use it as well, but I like to press it through a fine sieve because I don't like my potato puree with lumps. For me, it needs to be as smooth as possible. So now that we've pressed the potato through a fine sieve and the butter is melted, we can incorporate the two. I'm gonna do this in, let's say, 2 to 3 parts. Like I said, I'm using 1 part of butter for 1 part of potato. You could also use 80% of butter for 100% of potato, but I just prefer the 1-to-1. It's very rich in flavor, but it is so good. So now just mix it till all the butter is incorporated, and then continue with the remaining melted butter. Now just keep on mixing till all the butter is incorporated, but don't over mix it. If you over mix a potato, it will become very gluey and too sticky. That's not a nice texture. So just mix it until it's incorporated and directly stop. That's also why we never mix a potato with a blender. You'll end up with a gluey wallpaper paste. It's horrible. Don't do that. Have some patience, do it by hand. Now I just want to give you guys a little trick, because as you can see, the potato puree has split, and that is because the fat content is so high. But don't worry, there is an easy trick to fix this. Now just add a splash of milk and then mix it once more until it's one smooth puree. Now as you can see, the puree is already a lot better, but there is still some fat coming out. So that means it needs a little more milk, and we're going to mix it once more. Okay, now just look at that beauty. As you can see, there's no more fat coming out. It's completely smooth. It's an even potato puree. This is exactly what I'm looking for. It is slowly falling down. For me, this is the perfect texture. Now, the final thing we need to do is have a little taste test for seasoning. That's already perfect. If needed, just add a touch more salt. And if you want a thinner texture, just add a little bit more milk and give it one more mix until you're happy with the desired outcome. For me, like I said, this is absolutely perfect and it's ready to be served. To serve the potato puree, I would suggest to just serve it as a garnish or on its own with a delicious sauce. I wouldn't suggest to put something really heavy with it, maybe something fresh, just to balance the richness and then you'll have a beautiful, great dish. To heat this up, what I would do is I would just cover it, put it on a low heat and let it come to temperature very gently, because otherwise it might split again. Now you know how to fix it, just add a splash of milk, but it can also burn. So if you just put it on a low heat, or you put it in a piping bag in some hot water, but just take it low and slow, because if you put too much heat on this, then it will split for sure. Now let's just serve it for now like this and just enjoy the beautiful texture. Watch the entire series on Gronda and start mastering the fundamentals of cooking. Just click the link in the description.